Aleister Crowley, the man who called himself the Beast 666, black magician, drug fiend, sex addict, and traitor to the British people.
Crowley taught that the way you could live forever was by vampirizing little children sexually through tantric sex magic. This is a deception. Satan is deceiving these people to draw them into all kinds of profound evil.
Well, I've been an admirer of Aleister Crowley. I think that I'm carrying on much of the work that he started over 100 years ago, and I think the 60s themselves. You know, Crowley said, "Do what thou wilt, shall be the whole of law."
Mussolini deported Crowley and his followers from Sicily after reports of human and animal sacrifice and unimaginable sexual depravity caused an international scandal.
I have driven myself to delight in dirty and disgusting debauches and to devour human excrements and human flesh. I have mastered every mode of my mind and made myself a morality more severe than any other in the world. None of your faint approval or faint dispraise. To hell with Christianity, rationalism, Buddhism. I want blasphemy, murder, rape, revolution.
In 1920, Aleister Crowley founded a commune in Sicily to practice the beliefs that he said would one day sweep away Christianity. The British press called Crowley the wickedest man in the world.
1,000 years from now, the world will be sitting in the sunset of Crowleyanity.
This is what the devil plays before he goes to sleep.
Launched it into the mainstream, but Tyler, the Creator, the trap of the black magic, Kabbalism, and the whole idea of just the Crowleyism of the times. It was a significant part of that middle point of the 70s, and I really got completely disoriented by all that. It was an awful, dreadful period for me.
I'm closer to the golden dawn, immersed in Crowley's uniform of imagery.
One guy who pops up so often, you'd think he'd invented the backbeat. The Beatles featured him on the cover of their Sgt. Pepper's album. The photo montage was made up of what they called people we like and admire, and our heroes.
I can't think of any other occultist who's been more influential on rock musicians than Aleister Crowley. No one close. Times called Crowley the unsung hero of the 1960s. In fact, if you look at the 1960s counterculture leaders, John Lennon, he said his whole philosophy was, and he quoting Aleister Crowley's axiom, "Do what thou wilt," was the whole Beatles philosophy. He said in his interviews before his death was, "Do what thou willst." And they put their heroes up on Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band album, and who did they place there? Aleister Crowley. In fact, that whole album, as we show in our rockumentary, was basically a tribute to Crowley's New Eon, along with their Satanic Majesty's Request by the Stones that the Beatles put out with Sgt. Pepper. In fact, we make a really clear case for Sgt. Pepper being Crowley. In fact, Crowley died 20 years before that album came out, and of course the song 20 years ago today, Sgt. Pepper taught the band to play. It's quite interesting because not only was Lennon and the Beatles into Aleister Crowley, but we show the Rolling Stones and how they were into Crowley, and Mick Jagger and Keith Richards helping out with even Kenneth Anger's movies, pushing Aleister Crowley's Satanism in Lucifer Rising and so forth. So you have the Stones, you have the Beatles, the two biggest rock bands of the 1960s. You have Jim Morrison with a bust of Aleister Crowley, the biggest American rock idol of the 60s, on his album 13. We go on and on. Led Zeppelin, the biggest band of the 1970s. Jimmy Page buying Aleister Crowley's mansion overlooking Loch Ness, being full on into Aleister Crowley, and using implements of his temple on the Presence album on the front cover, as Crowley talked about in his books on ritual magic. And ultimately, that's where all this is leading. I mean, it's all about peace and love on the outside. When it all comes down, there's going to be a brutal leader that will emerge, who Crowley was forthright enough to talk about in his books, and talk about this bloodbath that would come, wherein Christians would be put to death in the establishment of the New World Order.
I'll tell you, when I was a kid, I read Robert Anton Wilson and all this, and here we are, we're standing here, we're talking about this, and it's real. If you do these things that you're told by Aleister Crowley, if you actually do what they say, things happen. Things occur exactly as it's described, and we can all do it.
And he personally bragged of having slaughtered 150 male children in 1 year.
And we can all do it.
Crowley taught that the way you could live forever was by vampirizing little children sexually.
And we can all do it.
He had so many Masonic degrees that you could fill up 5 pages of a book with them. This guy was probably the most highly honored Mason in the world, and he was also the most dangerous man of the 20th century. If you go to a Masonic funeral, you will hear them discuss the immortality issue. You will hear them promise that they will go to the celestial lodge above and live there forever. How do they get this immortality? They don't believe in Jesus. The name of Jesus is not allowed to be mentioned in the Blue Lodge of Freemasons. The secret that Crowley uncovered, probably through demonic intervention, is the secret that this immortality is conveyed through tantric sex magic. And the kind of sex magic that we're talking about here, unfortunately, is a sexual violation of a little child. Crowley taught that the way you could live forever was by vampirizing little children sexually. And he personally bragged of having slaughtered 150 male children in 1 year. This is why he was called the wickedest man in the world. And this, I apologize that this is so horrible, but Masons are doing this. Not all Masons, please understand me. Probably 1 in 100 knows about this. But this is a significant enough problem that I feel compelled to share it with you. In our ministry, with one accord, we have had to pray for literally hundreds of people who are the relatives of Masons, either children, grandchildren, nephews, nieces, whatever, and they have been sexually violated by their Masonic relatives, often in Masonic temples.
And he took an oath that he would surrender all of his magical powers that he had achieved until that date to concentrate his energy single-pointedly on the one task of destroying Christianity.
Christian persecution in some parts of the world is, quote, close to meeting the international definition of genocide.
The interim report says Christianity now faces the possibility of being wiped out in parts of the Middle East, where its roots go back furthest. For the world's Christians, the situation is especially dire.
Christians are the most persecuted religious group in the world, and it's accelerating.
And in Iraq, Christian numbers have slumped from 1.5 million before 2003 to less than 120,000 today.